Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of Warwickshire Council Audit and Standards Committee on Wednesday the 25th of February 2026. Thank you for attending or watching online. I'm Councillor Richard Howes, Chair of the Committee. Please be aware this meeting is being live streamed and will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel. Details of how the recordings are stored and how long they're retained for are available via the Council's website. Following on from the actions arising from the meeting held on the 21st of January, I can confirm that I've written to the Treasury Management Report authors to thank them for the hard work, and I wrote to group leaders to remind members to be respectful, especially during budget setting. I can further confirm the Audit and Risk Manager updated the committee regarding completed recommendations in the remote working internal audits. Members, an addendum has been published in regards to item 6 statements of accounts. Please can I check you've all read this, and if not, do members want me to adjourn for 10 minutes? Is everyone happy with that? Yeah, perfect, thank you very much. Emergency procedures. Councillors, are you happy with the emergency procedure or do you want me to read it out? Everyone happy with it? Thank you very much. And the reminder of mics. I've been asked to remind councillors when using mics, please don't place any equipment such as your laptop in front of the mic because it will affect the mic's effectiveness, and please remember not to turn away from the mic when speaking. I have with me here tonight supporting the committee. To my left-hand side, Principal Committee Services Officer Mia Matthews, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer Graham Leach, Head of Finance to my right, Andrew Rollins, Audit and Risk Manager Ian Davey, and to my right, Strategic Finance Manager Stephen Davies. Thank you very much. Item 1 is apologies for absence. We've received apologies from the following portfolio holder for strategic leadership, Ian Davison, and independent person Ray Tompkinson, and also Councillor Brown. Members, are there any other apologies at all? Okay. Item 2, declaration of interest. Members, do you have anything to declare on the agenda set out tonight? Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. Since we are discussing parish elections, scale of fees and charges, I need to declare I'm a member of Kenilworth Town Council.
Open the stable door. Anybody else would like to? Councillor Falk, Councillor Dixon.
I'm a member of Witnash Town Council.
A member of Kenilworth Town Council.
Councillor, go on.
A member of Warwick Town Council.
Any other? Thank you very much, councillors. Any other declarations of interest at all? Thank you very much. Item 3 is minutes. To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of January 2026. I'm happy to propose those from the chair. Do I have a seconder for those minutes? Councillor Falk, all those in favour of approving the minutes? Thank you very much. Item 4 is a budget review group minutes. To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of December.
Order.
Sorry, Councillor Dixon, apologies, sorry.
Sorry, could I raise a point of order before we get into items on the meeting? I'd like to thank Ms Matthews for the reminder this morning that there was a deadline for submitting questions, and I apologise for the fact that the questions I submitted, I apologise to officers, were after that deadline had passed. I believe there was only one councillor, one member of this committee who submitted any question before the deadline. And I just wonder, Chair, whether you might like to reassure us that you are happy that members of this committee have read the hundreds of pages of papers, bearing in mind that only one question has been submitted, or at least from one councillor, before the deadline.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon, and thank you to Councillor Syson, I think, who submitted the question in advance. I think it's a very fair question, Councillor Dixon. I would assume that all members, before they come to the committee, have a chance to read the papers and the documentation that comes forward. And obviously, whether they would raise questions during the meeting, I think it's important to remind members of the public that those obviously will be raised online to make members of the public aware. But I suppose it's part of members' commitment to this committee that actually they will have read all the documentation beforehand. As if they haven't, it's then quite hard on officers to be able to ask relevant questions, and obviously as a scrutiny committee to actually answer those questions therein. So I would hope that everyone has done it, and I would assume so unless anyone tells me differently. But thank you for the point, Councillor Dixon. Were there any other questions on the point of order at all? No, okay, thank you very much. back to item 4, if that's okay, the budget review. So just confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th December and 4th February. I'm happy to propose from the Chair, seconded by Councillor Falp. God bless you. Thank you very much. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Part A, item 5 is the internal audit progress report. Members, you'll be aware that there's some confidential appendices to this item. I am aware that we may need to go into confidential session, but please can we focus on the public element of the report first. And Mr Davey, I believe I'm handing over to you to start with.
Yes, thank you. This is the latest progress report. It's only been 5 weeks since the last one because the previous meeting was in January, so there's not been a huge amount of progress in the meantime. However, there's some key points that I'll bring to your attention. There's been a slight change in this year's plan. We've reprofiled the compliance audits contract, so only 2 are now being completed this year rather than the 3 that was in the plan originally, with fire safety compliance replacing one of the 2 that's not yet been started. And another audit's been dropped from this year's plan on project management because the team that deals with that is being restructured, so it's unable to progress at this time. While it's not included within the report, there's likely to be another postponement. I'm waiting for the head of service to get back to me because the community strategy has not yet been passed through the process, and the community health and wellbeing audit that was due to be done at the moment will obviously need to be delayed because there's no community strategy against which we can judge that service area. So kind of getting on to the normal progress, there's 1 audit that has been completed since the last meeting, and that's covered in the confidential papers. The other issue that I was going to raise, again, recommendations. There have been 13 revised recommendation target dates, and 11 of those had previously been revised. Councillor Richard Dixon did raise a question on this earlier to see whether there was any particular issues with those ones. I'm generally satisfied with the current responses provided, although there might be some need for following up should those ones not be completed by the revised target dates. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr David. Any questions on this report? Councillor Falp.
Yeah, I spotted the 13 and 11 revised dates, and you know what I'm like with the revised dates. But you've explained, you know, you're happy with it. It's more of a concern with knowing what is coming up with local government review in the next 12, 18 months. Do you, as an internal auditor, have concerns that the focus on internal audit recommendations will take longer? Because, you know, the workload is changing and pressure is being put on in different areas. So, I am quite concerned that the targets will not be achieved because of the level of work coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I share those concerns to some extent. I mean, one of the things we've always asked is that when people are setting the target dates, they try and set realistic ones that they're actually going to be able to adhere to. Obviously, in this case, it's again proved that not all of those have been realistic. I think there are other things other than just local government reorganisation, so things like the housing compliance action plan. You know, that's taken a lot of the housing team's time. Previously, with a lot of the accountancy team's recommendations, they were being delayed because of the need to get the previous year's accounts sorted. So there's generally, on the whole, there are reasonable reasons why they are taking longer. But yeah, again, I'll reiterate to people when the reports are being agreed that they try and set realistic target dates. I mean, one of the things I'll come on to when we discuss item 7 on the plan is that we've kind of allowed a bit more time for consultancy towards the end of the 2-year plan that we're proposing, because again, there's likely to be a lot of people that are going to be tied up with local government reorganisation when we get to that stage. So trying to get recommendations agreed towards the end of that period will probably not be realistic. So yeah, we've kind of tried to allow for that on the plan, but obviously we'll come on to that on item 7.
I really think we ought to, and I'd see what others feel on the group, that raise this as a concern to SLT and the administration, that, you know, we do have concerns about the level of work that officers are going to have to do in the next couple of years for a number of reasons. And we would, I know, we have some concern that internal audits may slip or words to their effect. Somebody might come up with a better phrase, but I really do, I'm already beginning to worry, you know, and I think it could get worse. So I'll leave it up to you, Chair, whether you can come up with better words, and if anybody else wants to raise that concern.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roos.
Thank you, Chair. Well, since I've been a member of Audit and Standards, we've been playing catch-up with these internal audits, and we've been promised at every meeting that we're going to catch up and catch up and catch up, but it seems to be going worse. So I'm looking at the completion of audit plan targeted as actual. We only completed 13 out of 28, so that's less than half that have been completed. I do understand there are 9 other audits that are in the draft report stage, but we're still falling further behind rather than catching up. So we're just looking for some assurances that these problems are going to be resolved.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the completion of the audits, I think largely on track. As I said, there's going to be one of them that is now going to be deferred in all likelihood, so that will reduce the number that we're expecting this year. Again, I know that my team's working through a number of the reports that are due to be completed by the end of the year. As you highlighted, yeah, there's a number in draft report stage. Some of those it's second stage. So we have first stage where the draft report goes out to the manager of the individual team, and then the second stage goes out to the head of service and the relevant either the chief exec, deputy chief exec, or the strategic director. So again, sometimes their workload might mean that they're taking slightly longer to respond. But again, I think once we kind of get to the draft report stage, we're generally happy. There's not too many changes, but it is just, again, I do keep chasing them to try and get them to respond as quickly as possible so that I can, again, bring them to this committee. Again, because one of the issues we had last year was that there were 16 reports that came to the Q4 meeting. We tried to get it so that it was progress reports at each meeting rather than all in quarterly basis, but in all likelihood there's going to be quite a few that come through at the end of the year again. So again, unfortunately that's fairly unavoidable, but yeah, we're trying our best to get them through to you as quickly as possible.
Is there anything that we can do or the SLT team do? Maybe some resources that we can allocate just for one time to get through all of this backlog, get on track, so make it easier in the next couple of years?
I think for the next 2-year plan, there's going to be a bit more flexibility within the plan as well, so that we've, rather than trying to get everything done in 1 year, there'll be, again, a bit more flexibility, and I will be trying to set quarterly, when we try to set the audits, they'll be done on a quarterly basis rather than trying to get everything allocated for the year as a whole. I think one of the things I will do between now and the end of this year is that as soon as the reports are finalised, I will let this committee know that they're all there. So rather than trying to have to review them all in one go at the end of the year, I'll make you aware of when they each become available. Again, I'm happy to take kind of any queries in advance and then kind of summarise those as part of the papers for the last update. But yeah, I think that's rather than trying to read them all in one go, I think that'll be probably the best way forward for the rest of this year and going forward as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for the comments and sort of hearing the concerns. And I think from my point of view, what I'll do is I'll make sure we book in some time with Mr. Davies. And I'm always a big fan of a very precise date for a deadline, so that we're very clear whether we're before it or after it, and also like the run-in to, as I say, getting things to meetings. It's kind of got the dates that are kind of before the meeting. So I think that's kind of what I'd be looking at, to have that discussion to make sure, see those milestones being met. So what I'll do is I'll commit to writing to you as a committee once Mr. Davey and I have met to look at that.
Any other questions on this at all from members? Councillor Rich Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would certainly endorse the comments of Councillor Falp, expressing concern as we go into local government reorganisation. I did ask Mr Davey after the deadline in connection with the 5 areas that are reported that had further extensions, if he could rank those as which one concerned him the most, which I understand is quite a difficult thing to do. My personal concern was actually the IT and cyber security risks, but I know there's been correspondence over that. And you were particularly concerned about VAT accounting, and I've read the current status there, which says that there is now going to be a new a timetable produced for the VAT returns, which go off monthly, as at the end of February. I guess a fairly basic question, actually, I take it you're assured that all VAT payments are up to date, as they should be up to date?
To be honest, the actual payments are not something that I deal with. I mean, I could probably pass you over to Stephen Leathley as the strategic finance manager, who's the line manager of the VAT accountant. Pass you over to him.
Yeah, so the VAT is all done digitally now, so within our financial system it is all automatically produced and prepared on a monthly basis. Within my team, we have a VAT accountant who will then review that, check it all, go and look at where any anomalies that he finds. There's also checks that we do against previous months to see if there's anomalies, if it's higher or lower, and actually investigate those, or one big part. That is already built into the daily system, basically, and the monthly returns that are completed. All our returns are then checked within the VAT office, and no errors have come back or no concerns have come back to date. So we seem to be in a good position.
Any other questions at all on this item? Just in terms, Mr Davey, in terms of Councillor Falp's point, I think the committee obviously placed a huge amount of responsibility on you as almost as like our head teacher to keep the organisation in check. So going back to Councillor Ross's comments, if there's anything that we can do as the committee in order to reinforce the work you do, because it's absolutely vital to the organisation and the credibility of the organisation as well. So there's anything that we can do to Councillor Ross's point, I think it is really, really valid. Would it be helpful, maybe if I have a conversation with Councillor Chilvers and we can maybe get some wording together that maybe have correspondence, would members be happy with that of the committee? Just to ensure that we continue to raise the importance of audit within the organisation. And I appreciate entirely in terms of with the changes coming forward, whether it be with LGR or whatever, but fundamentally without the service that you offer, Mr Davey, we're pretty blinded in terms of what goes on. So any help we can be, I'm sure all members would agree with that. Thank you very much. Okay, are members happy that we only need to note that report and move on? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr Leathy. Item 6 is statement of accounts. Mr Rollins, I believe I'll pass this over to you.
Thank you. So this report sets out the final statement of accounts that have been produced ahead of the audit backstop date, alongside the audit completion and findings reports, which outline one recommendation for the council and a management response is provided within that. There is also the draft letter of representation, which needs to be agreed by the committee as part of the recommendations tonight. So the audit findings report in itself outlines, while it obviously presents a disclaimed opinion, it does outline that significant progress has been made in the process of rebuilding assurance, which has been complex due to the number of disclaimed accounts that we've had going back to 21-22. So that work has progressed quite well during the year, but as Azette and Andy set out back in June 2025, that will take a number of years to realise and bring us back to a position where we can have unqualified accounts. It's worth noting at this point as well that the engagement with the external auditors and between the officers as well has been really positive as an experience. We're having regular dialogue and meetings, and it provides a strong foundation to continue that work into the 25-26 accounts, where the key aspect for WDC officers as well is to aim to achieve the draft statement of accounts deadline of the 30th of June 2026. So noting I had a question from Councillor Dixon that in the report it says 30th of June 2025, that should be 2026 for the draft statement for next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. Members, do we have any questions at all on this item? No? Councillor Chilvers, do you want to say anything on this, or are you quite?
Yeah, I think it's probably worth hearing from our colleague from the ZETS at this point.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks for the introduction. So yes, we've got our audit completion report on the agenda for this evening, which, as Mr. Rollins says, sets out the key findings from our external audit. I guess the key headline is the accounts are again disclaimed, which we knew going into this year that would be the case. But I think, as Mr. Rollins says, the focus we've had for this year, given we knew that we'd be looking at a disclaimed audit opinion, the focus has very much been to assess our approach to rebuilding assurance, to do as much work as possible as we could on the 24-25 account, so we wouldn't be going backwards in terms of the process of obtaining assurance, and then carry out a risk assessment so we knew what approach we'd need to take, and then really start that rebuilding assurance process. So during this year we have completed the risk assessment. I think at a previous committee I talked through what that risk assessment process would involve. And that was in line with auditor guidance issued by the National Audit Office this year. We've completed that. We have concluded that, unfortunately, we couldn't assess the council as low risk. I think there are a few key factors linked to the complexity of the council. It is, Warwick is quite a large, complex council compared to many district and borough councils with their housing revenue account, with a group structure. Also factors that, I think the key one being the fact that a new finance system was implemented in, I think it was 21-22, which was the first year that Grant Thornton disclaimed. So effectively we had no assurance on that financial year. So that has meant that the approach we're having to take is to go back and do testing on all of the disclaimed periods. But having done that assessment, given that we've now identified that, we've started that process in the current year. So we've completed a substantial amount of work on key areas such as the valuation of land and buildings and council dwellings, which we'd agreed was going to be a key focus for this year. The council did get a full valuation carried out, and so we've done considerable amount of work on that. We've started reviewing areas such as pensions, and that has identified, I think, the one adjustment that we report relates to the accounting treatment of the pensions position, the sort of asset ceiling that, because the pensions overall is now in a net asset position, we identified that hadn't been correctly accounted for and disclosed in the account, so that's now been corrected. We've started going back and working through prior year I&E figures, including areas such as payroll, which is obviously a key area of the council. We've reviewed, a considerable amount of work to review ledger populations all the way back to the last clean audit opinion. So I think we've made considerable progress. It will still take some time to complete this progress, but we are keen to continue working with the finance team. And actually, with the process of rebuilding assurance, we can do that at any time of the year. So we're actually intending to continue with that as soon as we sign off this year's accounts into March. We'll continue working through that. I guess at some stage the finance team will probably want a bit of a break from audit, so we will bear that in mind as well. But I think there's, now we've started the process, there's a lot more we can continue to do on this. So we're keen to do that. And I think the other key thing we'd want to do is, once we've signed up this year, is do that proper assessment of where we've got to in terms of the progress made to date and what the plans will be over the coming months into the 25-26 audit, so we can aim to effectively try and complete the build back process if possible by the end of the 25-26 audit, which I think still will involve a considerable amount of work, but that's the ambition at the moment, to try and get to that point. So really, I think those are the key messages. Other key points to remind the committee on the value for money assessment. I think we reported this back in November, but we have concluded that there were no significant weaknesses on the value for money assessment for the 24-25 financial year, which I think again is a positive message. But that's an overview of the report, so happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your detailed response. Councillor Val.
Yeah, I think it's just important to remind people that, you know, we're one of many district councils. You know, we're not unique in this for a number of reasons. Lack of auditors, etc., etc., etc. So I think it's important that we put the record state that we are not the only one. And it's really good to hear that we actually are making progress. It'll be lovely sometime when we can get an assured, but I think as long as we're moving in the right direction, then we've got to say well done, keep going, and we look forward to when we can have an assured report.
Totally agree. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Fab. Any other comments on this at all? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank Assets and also Mr. Rollins' team for all their work in getting us to this position. I'm not sure whether I've missed a meeting, actually. It says on page 125, which actually is in the annual governance statement, that this committee recognises that more audits internally are not achieving substantial rating. And then it goes on to talk about undertaking a self-assessment survey with an action plan for improvement during 2025-26. Now, I'm not sure, my memory may be fading, whether we've done that. And I'm conscious that this is the last Audit and Standards meeting of 2025-26. And I scanned item 11, the work programme, and I couldn't even see it on there either. Have I missed a meeting?
Mr. Leach.
No, it's not.
It just didn't like me. Through you, Chair, it's a very good observation by Councillor Dixon. It is a point that the Chair and I discussed, I can't remember which night it was now. It was last Wednesday, wasn't it? I think it was. Last Wednesday we discussed. The self-assessment was done by the committee. What we're trying to double track it alongside was the external review of the Constitution, which took place at the same time. I have had that report back in early January. It is a question of my capacity and time then to bring the two pieces of work together, which I think when we look at item 9 as an example in a moment of my capacity and unexpected events, is making a significant impact. And that also relates back to one of the outstanding audit recommendations as well, because one of the outstanding audit recommendations is the Code of Corporate Governance and updating that. That's also all tied in together. And it is literally having the availability of my time to sit down and go through that. It is a point where Councillor Hales and Councillor Syce and myself do want to sit down originally to look at the survey responses and that constitution. Start off with so we can help formulate and guide the committee somewhat as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Leach, and thank you, Councillor Dixon, in terms of that question. Were there any other questions at all on this item? So again, I'm happy to propose this item through the chair, seconded by... Oh, Councillor Richard Dixon got there first. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And can I just pass my work on before we move on to Assets and also to the finance team for all the hard work. I totally concur in terms of I think what Councillor Richard Dixon said. So thank you, Mr. Rollins, Mr. Lethe. You've been fantastic. So thank you very much in all that hard work. Item 7 was the internal audit plan. Ms. Davey, I believe I'm handing over to you for this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so as set out in paragraph 2.3 of the report, what we normally do about this time of year is present a detailed one-year plan as part of a 3-year strategic plan. However, due to the expected LGR date and in alignment with the service area plans that are being agreed, decisions been taken to pull together a 2-year plan, and yeah, with some time set aside for some LGR consultancy within that plan. The plan itself is based on discussions with departmental management teams, plus meetings with the Chief Executive, the Deputy Chief Executive and the Strategic Director, and reviews of the risk registers that are in place. Yeah, the extended timescale allows for a bit more flexibility, as discussed, so that rather than trying to get everything done within 1 year, and you know, trying to not having to give qualified opinions on my annual report, we've kind of allowed some more flexibility within the 2 years as well. Yeah, and as I kind of picked up on the progress report, if the community health and wellbeing audit is deferred from this year, that will be put as part of the plan. We'll just use some of the contingency time to get that into the plan for the next 2 years. Also highlight again, if LGR is delayed for any reason, then I'll bring a revised plan to this committee so that we show how we're actually going to deal with the time we've set aside for that. So yeah, any comments on either the report or the audits included within the plan? I'm happy to take those now.
Thank you, Mr. David. Any questions on this or comments? No? Are we all happy then to, well, again, I'm happy to propose it through the chair. I need a second by Councillor Jones. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Davey. Item 8 is the internal audit charter. Again, back to you, Mr. Davey.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so this is something that we have to produce as part of the audit standards that are in place. So it's something that I bring to this committee every year. Again, it kind of sets out the purpose of the audits and the core principles that we work to and the responsibility, authority and scope of the work we do. So yeah, it's a fairly standard document to help us comply with the internal audit standards. So happy to take any queries on that one.
Councillor Fab.
Just a matter of interest, does it change year on year, or is it, you know, do you have a lot of changes, or is it basically the same with just changing the date?
There's not a lot of changes. It has been amended to reflect the current standards. So it used to be the public sector internal audit standards. It's now the global internal audit standards in the UK public sector. So yeah, the reference to the relevant standards within it have changed, but in all honesty, most of the stuff we do doesn't change year on year. You know, obviously the plan changes, but the way we deal with things and trying to meet the standards is always the same.
I was going to be quite sad and see if I could find last year's and see if there was any changes, but unfortunately life got in the way.
Councillor Syson.
Thank you. Thank you for this, and you produce it year on year. It all reads wonderfully. In practice, does it work out?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, one of the things that will it was also required by the standards is that we have external quality assessments every 5 years. The next one of those is now due. So at some stage over the next year, you'll get a report on somebody reviewing our work to make sure that we meet the standards. There will be some work required around because the new standards came into effect effectively from April this year. So it's the first time we'll be audited against the new standards that are in place. So yeah, I think in practice the audits, yeah, they tend to follow the manual we've got in place and the charter. So yeah, I think it does work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Syson, Councillor Fab. Any other questions on this item at all? No, again, I'm happy to propose it through the chair, seconded by Councillor Russell. Thank you very much. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, members. Item B, part B now. Item 9 is a review of the May election. Mr. Leach, over to you.
Thank you. While this report has my name on it, the work was mainly done by the electoral services team as a collective. For some reason, they're not here tonight. I think it might be because they've got an election tomorrow morning. So they'll be in the office from 6 until about 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. So for that reason, I was delegated, I think is the best way of putting it, representing this report on the next one. But I think from that perspective, I think in terms of, if you look at developing our own team, this was brought through by officers, if that makes sense, rather than being written by myself, and actually reflects kind of the hard work they put into elections and delivering elections for the community. We at Warwick District Council have always committed to bringing these reviews back in terms of the transparency of the challenges which are faced within delivering elections, and to be brutally honest, in the last year, the challenges of delivering elections. I kind of referenced it earlier. If you go into a year of elections, you expect, oh, you've got the county elections in May, that's okay, you might get a by-election with that, but then it's, with all due respect to members, it is all those other by-elections we had last year. And this year we've got no scheduled elections at all. Great. But already we have one by-election that we're dealing with as well. And that takes a lot of time out of officers in terms of processing those. I won't say too much on the report. I'm happy to take questions. There are a couple of small updates I can say in there in terms of the other one, which if you look at my service area plan, which I'm sure you all do all the time, there's a reference in there to Police and Crime Commissioner elections and getting the money back from the Electoral Claims Unit for those. And I'm trying to remember which year they were now, 24? Yeah, 24. We were in a meeting this afternoon with the Electoral Claims Unit. They are now going through the final stages of sign-off. So we should have the money back within the next week or two. But you look at that. But if you compare that and you think about when I talk about election planning, the election isn't over for us until the accounts are finished. So the parliamentary election accounts from the same year, July 24, we have not even had initial observations on those from the Electoral Claims Unit as yet. And you're probably going through 3 or 4 stages of comments and responses back on those at least before you get the money back. So 4, maybe 5 months of work. So you look at that, and at that time we're carrying that extra liability. We get 2/3 of the money up front, 3/4, but it's still that extra money which is involved. So, and that's necessarily the part which you as councillors and the public don't necessarily see all the time, is closing those accounts off. So from our perspective, we do, there are some where we are really pleased in terms of the response and relationships we have. It's referenced in here about, say, the town council by-elections, how quickly they come back, check, challenge and pay the bills. It does make a big difference for us in terms of getting the work out. Equally, we try and get the bills out as quickly as we can, but I'll let you imagine how long it takes sometimes to get the bills in from 80 different polling stations, as an example. Never mind all the other bills where you're looking about £480,000 for one all-out election across Warwick District. So happy to take questions.
I've got a few. Just before I move on, I think I probably speak collectively for all the committee when we like to thank the hard work of the electoral services team. So if you can pass that back, Mr. Leach, because I think in terms of the work and the amount of work they've had to go through, I think is phenomenal. So I'm sure as a committee, we'd just like to say thank you in terms of doing that. I had Councillor Fatt first, then Councillor Gorman. And, yeah.
And I know we do it, but I think we do have to be aware that, every time there's a by-election, it costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of time and effort by everybody. So, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying don't do it because we haven't, I'm happy with this report. It's good to read it and understand it. And it's horrific that, outside bodies have got our money and won't give it us. And I don't know what we can do to address that. Again, it's looking forward. There could be a lot of elections in the next few years at different times. I haven't looked at your service plan recently, Mr. Leach. So, but is there in there, extra capacity for all the extra elections we're going to get, or may not get?
Through you, Chair. It's a good question. In the service area plan which is coming forward, there is reference to local government reorganisation and elections, and what does that look like? Because the question we don't know at the moment is, what does that look like? And when I say we don't know what that looks like, so while we're looking at, is it 1 unitary or 2 unitaries, we don't know what those ward boundaries will be for that new authority as yet. The timescales that we have for setting those boundaries are somewhere between the decision being taken over 1 or 2 authorities and when the orders go through Parliament, because that will be what those orders we're expecting by November. There is then a lot of work to do to get an election delivered on new boundaries and the work to be done. So what I can say, electoral services team have just been through a restructure with extra resources committed into that team by the council over, to be fair, you know, there's a good structure in there with 2 extra officers coming in here on 2-year contracts while assistant roles. And that provides them a good space. The other bit we don't know, which really does drive an election, is who the returning officer is going to be. Because there's a number of different structures and methodologies depending on which way we go. If I give you a couple of examples very quickly, let's say we're a single unitary in Warwickshire, okay? So Warwickshire County Council elections, as you've seen through here, delivered by the returning officer, Monica Fogarty, as Chief Executive of the County Council. Then we, as the elections teams, report into their Dem Services team to provide a structure for delivering the elections across the whole of Warwickshire. Police and Crime Commissioner elections, again, whole of Warwickshire, 1 returning officer for Warwickshire, but then that's normally a returning officer within one of the 5 district and boroughs, well it is, and then their team takes the lead of coordinating across Warwickshire. 2 very different methods, but if you then think about that, you think about the potential for creating a new culture within an organisation and whether Warwickshire County Council is continuing authority or not, there could be arguments there about which way it goes. That could be one of those political discussions which happens during the summer months in terms of who's taking that role on. And it's a real big challenge. And then, of course, you've got a north-south option as well, where you begin to look at options again, and what does that look like, and how do you deliver that? So, yeah, at the moment, the team confident they've got that resource, but we've just got to keep monitoring that and seeing what those challenges are which come forward. It is going to be a challenge.
Thank you, Councillor Fab. Good question, as I had written down to ask as well. So, good question. Councillor Gorman.
Thank you. I note the reference to issues at the Lane site during the Park Hill by-election and how the gates were opened and concerns around pedestrian safety. Was there something in particular at that site which was an issue? Because I'm just thinking of other sites where you've got temporary polling stations in car parks. Was there something specific there, and is there something that we should be concerned about with other sites?
Through you, Chair, temporary buildings for polling stations are a significant challenge in delivering them safely. There is no other way of putting it. There are a number of measures that we try to protect through, let's say, accidental vehicle incursion into those buildings, because they are soft buildings. So you do have to try and put measures in to protect them. And that is something we are going through. We do, as an authority, have purchased some lovely concrete blocks. You see them on highways and safeways, and that's what we're trying to use. On the Lays Lane site in particular, I'm quite content to say it was me who did the initial assessment. I think all of you know I'm from Kenilworth. In my view, initially, there was sufficient parking at the site, because actually the gate actually allows for 3 cars to be parked in front of it. We know this because we did a site visit and we all parked in front of it. And there's sufficient on-road parking as well. However, during the day, I think it's fair to say we had some significant feedback from a number of electors who engaged with tellers and our staff. And we basically reversed that decision, because actually it was, in the end, it was about actually the time it was taking to deal with electors each time, if that makes sense. That's where the concerns were. So could we have done it differently? Yes, we could. Are we going to use the Lays Lane site again? It feels very, very unlikely we will use that site again for a number of reasons that all councillors are now smiling for. But that doesn't stop the challenge of temporary buildings and where we locate them. So if I give you an example, Fusilier Way, we use one, quite open, you know, people are out there. But actually, you look at where we locate that, it's actually located behind some stone bollards for that very reason. It's a bit more of a challenge to get it in, but that's the type of measures we are looking at. And to be brutally honest, that's the kind of security measures we're looking at all our polling stations and the accessibility. And even I won't go into too much more, but even the count venue, I think you've all experienced the extra security we put in there to try and mitigate those risks to the public.
Councillor, do you have a follow-up, or are we happy with the response?
I think my largest concern was around the Myton Fields polling station, considering that, and I don't know if there's other polling stations that are similar to that, but there's no separate pedestrian access, and it's in a car park, so I was just wondering if sites like that have been considered and whether there's others that are...
I think I can, through your chair, sorry, I think our continued review is to try and get rid of temporary buildings where we can. Myton Fields is a significantly challenging area for us to get a polling station in. We have we've tried and left each school along that road, let's go for that, as well as a number of other buildings. Myton, we do normally have staff on to traffic manage the site as well, to help from that pedestrian perspective. I'm trying to recall, and I can't recall, to be brutally honest, I don't think my team were watching, but I was trying to remember if we added in concrete blocks in front of the buildings last time, and I think we did, just to try and help filter the traffic between people and building as well. But it is one of the areas we are constantly looking at. And I would also say one of the primary reasons for not having temporary buildings is their cost. It will, if you look at, they are our most expensive polling stations, and we do get challenged on them when we submit accounts because of their expensive nature.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Syson.
Thank you. You've referred to local government reorganisation. What about your future plans for the elections bill now going through Parliament?
Thank you, Councillor Syson.
I do know part of the answer, but I think all the committee know.
Well, no, there's also a second bit to it as well. So apologies, I need to get my phone out to make sure I don't misquote it. So just a moment. And this also answers a question which Councillor Dixon kind of asked as well about Lays Lane as well. So there is the Representation of the People Act, well, Representation of the People Bill 2026 going through Parliament at the moment. There is also a trial of flexible voting pilots in the 2026 elections as well. And that is one that I would draw members' attention to in terms of being aware of, because I have a feeling if that pilot is successful, may become more widely deployed across the country. So I will deal with that one first. So the flexible voting pilot, which councils were invited to, but we weren't because we don't have elections in May. Voting at any polling station in a local authority area. Voting hubs, so central polling stations in busy places that are in addition to the normal polling stations. Mobile polling stations, so that would be ones where on election day or in advance of election day they go around certain locations, such as, let's say, care homes, to enable people to vote in person, moreover. And then the last one is early in-person voting at polling stations or hubs ahead of polling day. Now, I'm going to let you digest that one when I go on to the next one. And the reason why I say that, because I think you all can appreciate what that comes with, is significant extra burden on staff in terms of time and arranging, but also that is going to come with cost as well. And I'm hoping that is some of the things which are considered as part of the pilot. The next bit is Representation of the People Bill coming through Parliament. That includes, primarily from an officer's perspective, the addition of 16 and 17-year-olds having the ability to vote. And therein, how do you register 16 and 17-year-olds to vote? Because if you look at it from that perspective, at the moment, you can go on the register from 16 when you get national insurance number. 16 will be too late if you can vote on your 16th birthday. You can work out the permutations. So that's going through Parliament at the moment. I would suggest you all subscribe and get the alerts as it goes through each stage. It's quite an interesting read. We think part of the push is for that to be in place for the elections next year. And if it's not, it's a double win, I'm afraid, because actually for us, our next elections are in 27. The next ones we expect after that are a UK parliamentary election, because we have no scheduled elections in 2028. Unless we get a mayor from West Midlands Combined Authority, but that looks unlikely. So it would be delivering that for the first time in a general election, which is, I would say, a significant risk for delivering of that election for a team. You can think of it from a reorganisation point of view. It'll be a new elections team coming together to some extent because it will just formed into, and then delivering that as well where there's no necessary experience of that. That is going to be a challenging period for the returning officer for that election. There is also other bits in there which I would draw members' attention to. So there's the introduction of non-photo ID as well for voting. What would that look like? It's quite simple. It's the proposal at the moment is for you to be able to use bank cards instead of photo ID. That again feels like a concern to me as a professional officer, mainly because if you look at it, voter ID was introduced for that assurance for checking who the individual is when they come in to vote. I need to go and do more work on it and read through it more, but if you look at it from my perspective, a bank card is no different to a polling card. Anybody can pick it up. If I use the analogy, there are 2 G Leaches in my house. Our bank card says G Leach on both of them. This causes me disadvantage at times, but you get the sentiment. And ironically, they will be voting for the first time in the next general election. So I think there are points that members should be aware of. There are other bits within that bill in terms of stricter guidelines and restrictions on parties in terms of funding and looking at those requirements. But I think if you just look at those couple of highlights, it is a concern for me personally.
Councillor Richard Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to Mr Leach for this report. I'm sure he probably has spoken to his counterparts in Nuneaton and Rugby recently, but what they must be going through, being on off and back on again, must be horrendous. So I suppose we should be grateful for small mercies on this. I have one particular question which I have already submitted, looking for a bit more explanation around the non-use of Kenilworth School in elections last year, which if Mr Leach could answer that, and then I've just got a couple of more points, if I may, Chair.
Through you, Chair, I'll go to Nuneaton Rugby first. Nuneaton's elections were always on. They didn't request them. Rugby, I'll be honest with you, I haven't talked to colleagues there about them being back on. What I can say is that actually before that decision, again, as part of the development of the electoral services team Warwick District, actually we had already been approached by another authority to go and help support them during the elections as part of our team's training, learning and development this year, which we thought was a really good opportunity for the team to see how another authority operated, bring ideas back for us, but also provide them support and the experience and knowledge of our officers as well. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that relationship builds out. In terms of Kenilworth School, I would say that using schools is our next challenge after porter cabins. To be fair to head teachers, they don't really want us in their schools, I think is the honest way of putting it, because of the challenges it brings, bringing the general public into a school building, and we completely get that. The problem is the locations of schools are normally central, really good locations for using, and they have a statutory obligation because they're public funded, even Kenilworth School is, that we can then use those buildings. And one of the challenges we are having overall is finding more and more polling station locations as, say, new developments arrive, but also as some locations no longer become available as well. So Kenilworth School, we tried for the May County Council election. We then had a review. We've had a review more recently with Kenilworth School as well about some of the challenges. I think it's fair to say they're nervous about us using the hall because of the implications of how that you have that interaction then potentially with kids, or it opens the school up. But also, not only that, during the school days, I think Kenilworth councillors are aware, others may not be, is that they do function quite late into the night at Kenilworth School with other activities going on, so sports clubs, both from the school and public services, other services as well. So that's where some of their nervousness comes from as well. So again, we are looking at, is there a different way of working with the school? Is there different options? But equally, by and large, is there also an alternative in those polling districts? And let's be honest with you, we all know Kenilworth well. We are really limited for polling stations, and that's not just Kenilworth, it is across the whole of Warwick district, really and truly, and that is a challenge for us.
Thank you, Mr Leach, for that answer. If I could move on to the comments in section 2.5.1, because I'm conscious that maybe in the last 2 years, the level of remuneration to staff, polling station staff and at count has been increased. I'm not saying the elections team is an old team, don't get me wrong, but it does have this massive increase in the number of people that it has to manage and recruit for a short period of time. The elections wouldn't take place if it wasn't for the ability to recruit 750 staff. Are you happy that the ability to do that is not going to jeopardise ability to deliver elections? Because I'm conscious that even now, the level of remuneration is not high.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think from my perspective, feel free to make a submission to the Electoral Claims Unit about remuneration rates for election staffing. What I'm going to say is for the by-election, as an example, tomorrow, I've had 2 complaints this evening that people weren't approached to work on that by-election. I'm not going to say who they were. But from that perspective, in terms of recruiting, largely, we're actually doing really quite well as Warwick District. I would say we outperform our neighbouring authorities in terms of the ability to recruit. I think that is through a number of different initiatives the team have brought in themselves. We constantly recruit as well, so we don't just recruit during election time. The advert's pretty much up all the time to say, do you want to come and work on elections? It's part of our corporate induction at WDC. But if we take a step back for a moment, even if we used all of WDC's staff on election day, just for a moment, we'd still be about 200 people short. If you look at it, if you give that idea of mass, so if you think we used everybody on WDC for election day, that's about 560 odd members of staff in WDC. So we'll still be about 200 people short. So it gives you a really good idea of actually the growth of the organisation. And it is managing those numbers of members of staff as well. And you will naturally have people who drop out at the last moment due to various circumstances, and that will happen. And I think the way my team has kind of risen to that has been phenomenal, really and truly, in terms of bringing through new people, developing and training people. It's been really impressive. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Leach. Perhaps the only other comment is in connection with the 16 and 17-year-old, that there are some people who have only had 16 birthdays who have already been elected as a councillor.
Through you, Chair, I was trying to do the maths quickly in my head. I wonder who that could be.
Were there any other questions at all on this? Oh, Councillor Kate Dixon.
Yeah, it's going back to the subject of cost, and Councillor Faltmell mentioned at the start of this discussion about the cost. Just aware of the cost of elections and its effect on democracy, and I'm thinking particularly of the cost to the town councils and the way that those costs have gone up significantly over the last 3 or 4 years. And I welcome the report that's here, but how much is are decisions made considering the cost to the authority for the elections, and is there any more that could be done to limit the cost to particularly town councils?
Through you, Chair, we're almost skirting on to the next report. And the reason why I say that is because last year the committee took a decision in terms of proportionality of election costs and how they'll be charged back, which I would have to refresh myself with the exact wording of for other elections. Because otherwise, if you look at, let's take a town, if we don't pass the cost onto the town council, it's something the district council has got to pick up. So it's that taxpayer burden overall. So if I address it from a taxpayer's perspective, be it national or local, I think part of the challenge is the additional demands and the additional work which needs to go into delivering elections. I think if you look at it, the Electoral Commission guidance changed in terms of the number of staff having a polling station. It became more fixed and higher numbers, so more staff, more cost. I think you're all well versed in my line in terms of the cost of postal votes. They have to go first class. So we post them out first class, they post back first class. The taxpayer picks up that burden of first class postal votes. You've seen in this report we've got about 18,000 postal votes for all our elections. What we tried to do for postal votes as an example where we can is combine them. But actually that's not always possible because we're setting up elections months in advance, our printers are as well. And we have to make that commitment of where we're going to have elections. And also some of the types of paper aren't always compatible as well. So it makes it really quite hard. The bits where we do look to reduce costs, obviously by sharing costs for polling stations and the count venue. I think the big one, which I think some members have realised in most recent weeks, is actually the 2031 town and parish council elections. That's actually where the big one is that you will need to be aware of. It's in a public report. It was in the report on LGR to this council November, December time. What we have been told by MHCLG is that they expect, and we all know that things can change when they say expect, 2027 Shire Authority elections and town and parish council elections. They then do not expect the elections for the new unitary until 4 years after vesting day, 2032. Town and parishes will be 2031. That is where the risk year is, and then thereafter, because they won't sync up. So when we get to those papers and the orders which come through and negotiations with MHCLG, that is one of the points we are going to have to pick up and have a real good dialogue about, because that won't just be us, that will also be, well, it'll be South Warwickshire as a whole, but also the rest of Warwickshire as well. And you think about that across the country, the impact that has on the taxpayer, but also the impact that has on the electorate as well, in terms of engagement, let's be honest. So in terms of how we look at costs, we always try to minimise costs where we can. We try to work more effectively with the resources we have as well by reusing equipment and minimising that. We also look, the other challenges that we do have is the new laws and guidance coming in where we have to increase cost as well. And what we try to, I say we, the electoral services team, I'll give them the credit for this, is that actually in a number of instances we've been successful in getting justification-led bids from MHCLG, so extra money coming back into the council to reduce that cost of some of the equipment initially. But you look at one of the ones which is coming forward will be audio tactile voting devices, and the cost of those, A, to purchase originally, but then B, the digital ballot papers to go with them each time as well. And they're some of the things we can't avoid, but we're looking at how we introduce them effectively. And to do that, we've partnered up with a charity in Warwick who are experts in this area and actually have conversations and come down and do training for elections officers across Warwickshire.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, sorry, Councillor Dixon, do you have a follow-up question? Apologies.
Yes, if I could just come back, you mentioned about doubling up on the postal votes. My understanding is that a couple of years ago that was the significant increase. The town council ballot papers went out separately to district council papers, and also the same happened with the polling cards as well. So it was doubled. There was a double up of those. Just to reassurance.
Through you, Chair, I'll comment on polling cards. No, I think we only issue one poll card. The difference in poll card where the cost has gone up significantly was the change in the law. So there was an extra requirement for a lot more information to go on the poll card, and it changed it from being a poll card to actually having to be a letter in an envelope. So if you think of moving from an A5 piece of card and the cost of posting that to an A4 sheet of paper in an envelope and posting that, you've kind of quadrupled your price.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Just to bring you back up on what you were talking about earlier with regard to the changing legislation and ID requirements for younger people, do we see much evidence of voter fraud that would make it problematic? I mean, there was a lot of criticism when the law came in the first place that was this really needed?
Thinking how to carefully answer. I suppose through you, Chair, my answer would be I wouldn't necessarily become aware of voter fraud unless somebody else presented themselves in a polling station saying there'd been a conflict there. And in my time at WDC, I can only think of a couple of instances where that has occurred, and my view is where they've occurred, that has been errors potentially by the polling staff in marking the wrong person off, even though that would be my personal view on that. In terms of voter fraud overall, I mean, we've got the ID, that's why we work through. So it is tough, that's what we have to enforce. What I would say is that what we've seen is that very few people do actually come to polling stations as a percentage overall without ID. The message has got through. Where we have seen numbers of people being turned away because they don't have ID, actually a percentage of them do come back, but a wide percentage go. I've been here once.
Councillor Fowler.
Yeah, it's similar with Councillor Kate Dixon. I think we were speaking about it last night, and the 2031 elections will cost Whitlash £100,000 because we have 4 wards. And while we're very prudent and are already putting our money away, for a small town like Whitlash to absorb £100,000 for an election, if they're contested, is so difficult. Really, and I think residents need to be aware of this, how much it actually costs us to be democratic. And obviously, the bigger towns will, if they've got more wards. And the question was raised last night. Don't have to, I was going to email anyway. Do we have to have 4 wards? Can't we have 1 Whitlash ward? Why do we have to have 4 wards, which will cost us £25,000 each time? I presume it's something to do with numbers, but I will email you, Mr. Leach, because the question was raised last night as to why.
Point of order, Chair. Does the member have to disclose an interest as the member for Whitlash?
Definitely.
Through you, Chair. The answer would be you could request a community governance review of your ward boundaries. I think there might be some significant challenges there in terms of the size of Whitlash Town Council now and how that would be represented. So I think I'm going to cast my... I'm sorry, I go back to Kenilworth again. I go back to Kenilworth, and actually the last boundary review of Warwick District ward boundaries, at the same time there was kind of a CGR of Kenilworth Town Council boundaries, where some of Kenilworth Town Council want to retain its overall number of councillors, and at the same time it recognised that 2 of the wards would be too big in terms of the number of councillors in those areas to actually work effectively with the community, but also quite big in terms of area. So essentially those 2 wards were then subdivided down to reasonably even numbers and size of area to actually help the electorate identify with the area. Now obviously, going into local government reorganisation, we don't know what the ward boundaries are going to be. And as we referenced a couple of meetings back with Lapworth and Rowington Parish Council, there was a suggestion there, and I'm still of this mind, that actually post-local government reorganisation, we may want to look at community governance overall across the new council area. I say we. The new council may want to look at community overall, but equally we might have to look at them some quite quickly, because as you're all well versed, a parish or town ward or boundary, so either the outer circle or its inner, cannot cross either a county, district, or now insert unitary ward boundary. So there may have to be some which have to be aligned quite swiftly as part of what's going through Parliament, which I'm looking forward to.
Can I ask that, obviously it's an important thing for our parish and town councils, and, are we going to be given briefings on this or information on this, or because we all know that it's going to cost us more money, but actually, as I said, I've had a lively discussion last night that Councillor Franklin agree that, it was raising real concerns along the, all the councillors that were there.
Through you, Chair. It's on the schedule of work for the elections team, but if we could stop having by-elections, we might be able to arrange the briefing, is the honest answer. So it is there, basically, to actually have, and we have committed previously to having a briefing session with the clerks to sit down and have a discussion about the actual structure of elections, what's coming forward, and also kind of bringing them up to speed in terms of what's changing in electoral registration as well, because it does have a real impact for the clerks as well, to the councils. We see that in terms of the challenges they face as well.
Barrows.
Just to come back from a sort of cabinet perspective, so we've been speaking to obviously Chris Elliott about when do we brief people, because obviously at this moment we're in that limbo period of everyone going, is it, Graham Leach will agree, me and him have had many hypothetical conversations of, is it county boundaries, is it district boundaries, is it this boundary, well if it's this, it's this. And I think you could tell how nerdy we could get into that conversation about that, but I think it's one where we are saying when we have more information, we need to have them briefings like we did when the white paper came out with the town and parish councils. We appreciate the county council might do the same thing as they did last time and go and have their own meetings, and obviously keep in contact with obviously the Association of Town and Parish Councils, your Walk, appreciating though not all the town and parish councils in our area are members of that, so we have to make sure you all get the same information, because where there's absence of information, rumours start flying, and I think at the moment we're all waiting for that bit more clarity, and rest assured it is, I have escalated it further about our concerns.
Were there any other questions on this item at all? There's just one for me, forgive me, Mr. Leach. Obviously, one of the challenges with schools is obviously around the safeguarding aspect. And I suppose one of the comments is not necessarily just for the people who are going to vote as the voters, but also for the staff there and their accessibility to obviously, various places they'll need to go. One of my queries was in terms of going back to I think Councillor Dixon's question regarding staff. Obviously, a lot of the secondary schools have exam invigilators who obviously are full DBS checked. So actually, just in terms of the opportunity to use schools, it might be an opportunity for the election team to maybe reach out to the schools and say, which exam invigilators have you got that might be available? Because actually, if they are DBS checked, that actually would probably sort a number of the issues out for them being on site during the day without having a member of staff with them at the same time.
That's a really good idea, Chair. But actually, it's not just a really good idea in terms of just the schools, but actually in terms of potential audience to tap into as well. Because the team have built a very good relationship with most secondary schools across the district already, in terms of going out and doing some work. We did some work last year in terms of presentations about what democracy is and engaging. It's amazing what the team go out and just do, I think is the point. But actually, I think, yeah, in terms of making those contacts and passing it on to their invigilators, I think it's a really good idea.
At the school where I'm a governor, actually has their own elections every year, which I'm always invited in, where they have their school council, etc., etc. And they actually, I think, welcomed the election to be used as a station, polling station, because they felt it was important that the young people, bearing in mind that the chance that the sixth form will be voting in the near future. And actually said, yes, come in, because we want our young people to be involved in democracy earlier. So every child in the school has a chance to vote once a year on one or two things. But they're very keen to actually welcome the understanding all the safeguarding, etc. if we want young people to understand democracy and take part in becoming councillors and, you know, voting, then that's the age to get them when they're in school. So it's that balance between safety, you know, you know, and encouraging our young people to be involved in politics.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Like I say, it might be an option for the team to look at moving forward. But okay, were there any other questions at all on this item? If I just go back to my first point, Mr. Leach, if you can pass on our heartfelt thanks to your team in terms of the hard work they do, it is really, really appreciated in terms of the complexity of everything coming forward. So thank you on behalf of the committee for all that they've done. Again, I'm happy to propose this through the chair, seconded by Councillor Jones. Thank you very much. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Item 10, election fees. I know we might cover this briefly, but Mr. Leach, do you want to say anything on this report at all?
No, again, through you, Chair, this was written by a member of the team. And again, they've asked me to present it tonight because they're busy tomorrow. So which, again, is very reasonable. The idea behind this really is just to update the fees. We've got some new responsibilities going in there. They're not necessarily new responsibilities. They're works we've done before, but it's clarifying what the roles are. So again, when we go to submit accounts nationally or to anybody else, they can see, have that clear definition of what the role is for and why we're paying people for that role. So quite a simple report this time.
Any other questions on this report at all? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. 6.7 got the reserve for the shadow authority elections. I'm quite conscious that we've had, I heard a rumour before that we budget for around one by-election expected per year, but I think the average has gone up a little bit. So are there any considerations on that front?
Through you, Chair. Yes, there was. I'm almost looking at my colleagues from finance, but yeah, as part of the budget setting process this year, we actually looked at do we need to make an allowance for more by-elections, for WDC by-elections in year? The thought process we came to in the end was no, we probably don't. That makes, because actually, we are very much at the high end of trajectory for by-elections, so we're hoping that things have tailed off somewhat and they won't be repeated, just from an emotional workload as well. But actually, in terms of the reserve as well for the elections in 2027, there is an expectation for delivering that election. All 6 authorities will contribute towards that cost of delivering the election. So actually, and if you then put on top of that, town and parish councils contributing towards that election cost as well, it slightly changed that figure and actually provides a bit more variation. But we do look at that election reserve year on year about whether more money needs to go in based on what we're seeing in electoral law changes and or if we have more by-elections as well.
Thanks. I just wonder if it's All Saints or Woodlows or Clarendon that's going to have the next one.
Okay, Councillor Dixon.
I just wonder how the staffing structure compares with other local neighbouring authorities. Is it comparable, and will this help in reorganisation?
So, in theory, and I don't know because I'd have to go and have a look, all elections teams should be basing their pay bands on the national scales and bands within them. When we have Warwickshire-wide elections, we do sit down as elections officer and have a discussion about the pay being provided, and the returning officer for that would normally set key fees, so presiding officers, poll clerks, certain count staff as well, and then they'd allow a range for the others, recognising local economic differences, potentially, as an example. However, you're absolutely right. When we get into local government reorganisation, this is going to be another one of those things which is going to be a piece of work to align those pay to look at one election then across the whole area. It will be another piece of work. However, I suppose from that perspective, that for next in 2027, we'll have that Warwickshire-wide discussion, so they should all be broadly aligned, but also how elections are delivered are different in each authority area as well. How, say, the roles are defined in terms of, let's say, postal vote opening, you'll have different role definitions, but doing broadly the same work in a slightly different process. So there will be a lot of alignment of work. And also, how do you do that work as well? So, for example, if we talked about postal vote opening process for a moment, I think all of you have been and watched a postal vote opening process. How would you think about that going forward when we're in one or two authorities? Let's say we're in two authorities, would you just have one for Unitary of South Warwickshire, or would you have two different locations? What are the practical sides around that? Would you have one big count? Because again, it's about setting that culture of the new organisation, bringing it together. And I know I'll go back to the potential merger with Stratford a few years ago. That was one of the discussions. We should have one big count to start off with because it's a new organisation starting up. So actually one count, one venue, and actually you bring everybody together from that starting position. So again, yeah, they are some of the trickier conversations to have, and they're relatively easy decisions to take, but there is the politics involved in them and how that will play out. And that's where they become more complex and lengthy.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item at all? No? Okay, again, I'm happy to propose it from the chair, seconded by Councillor Phelps. Just got you, but Councillor Phelps, all those in favour? 3 hands in the air. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 11 is the Audit and Standards Work Programme. Graham, over to you. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, there is a report on there which I should have brought in terms of code of conduct complaints. I think since we've last met, you are well aware of some additional meetings that I've had to facilitate and some resource challenges as well around those. What I can say is that at the moment, I have 2 live cases and 1 that I am due to close. The 2 live cases are at different stages of the process as well. I'm trying to, but yeah, that's all I can really say on those cases. But yeah, since we last met, 1 has almost closed, which is all I can say in public at this time.
Councillor Phelps.
Just to say, I know you use mediation in a lot of these cases. Just in case you use the mediation service, you don't use the one that I'm a secretary of, well, why not? And but if you did, I'd have to declare an interest.
Why not, Mr. Leach? No. Any other questions on this at all? Or members happy to note it and move on? Happy to move on. Thank you very much. Item 12 is public and press. So I'm going to propose from the chair to exclude public and press for the reasons set out on the agenda. To consider resolving under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972. The public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items by reason of likely disclosure of exempt information within paragraphs 1, 2, 3 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, following the Local Government Acts Information Variation Order 2006. Beautifully read, isn't it? I'm happy to propose from the chair, seconded by Councillor Russo. All those in favour? Thank you very much.